My name is Roxy Madison. I'm 30 years old, and my entire life revolves around Cervantos, the restaurant I've managed for several years now. While many people think my job is prestigious, as the restaurant is always full and the bills are hefty, the reality is that every workday is a struggle against exhaustion. Endless phone calls, cranky customers, and long shifts from which I don't get home until 10 at night, often with legs feeling like lead. That evening, when I finally had the rare chance to go to the suburbs to visit my parents, the very house where I grew up and where the walls still remember my childhood dreams and first tears, I felt a strange excitement in my chest, as many months had passed since we had last gathered as a family. Our house was the same, a 3-bedroom apartment with large windows that shimmered so beautifully with the streetlights. As I got out of the car and walked up to the door, I noticed a familiar sight through the glass. My older brother Marcus, always confident in himself and his choices, was sitting with his wife Jenny, who was beaming with happiness, while their children, Emma and Luke, were running around, noisy and animated like little whirlwinds. My younger sister Chloe was sitting on the sofa, comfortably cuddled up with her phone and laughter, and next to her was her new boyfriend Derek. To be honest, their quiet closeness gave off a certain air of solitude that made me feel a little more acutely alone than usual. The air was already filled with the scent of my mother's dinner, stewed meat, tender mashed potatoes with milk and butter, and the simple green beans I'd always loved as a child when my mother would cook them with a little bit of bacon for flavor. We gathered at the same table where I learned to eat with a knife and fork, and where I once did my homework to my dad's grumbling, and the usual arrangement hadn't changed. Marcus and his family on one side, Chloe and Derek across from me, and I, as always, next to Mom, as if 20 years hadn't passed. "So, Marcus, how's the new promotion going?" My father spoke first, his voice so confident and composed, as if he'd been waiting for this question all evening. Marcus, of course, turned into all his self-importance and launched into a detailed account of how he was now a senior account manager at his insurance company, how his responsibilities had increased, and how he saw this as a step toward even greater success. Jenny took the opportunity to say how proud she was of him and that they were finally able to consider a bigger house, where each child would have their own room. I watched Mom beam when Jenny added that Emma was already reading at a 5th grade level, and it sounded like a proud announcement, after which Mom happily leaned over to ask Luke about what he'd learned in kindergarten. I ate my stew slowly, feeling the conversations flow past me, discussing the details of their daily lives, Emma's swimming lessons, Luke's attempts at potty training, and the whole flow seemed so rich, so familial, while I seemed to disappear somewhere off to the side. After the gushing over Marcus and his perfect family was over, the attention smoothly shifted to Chloe, and Dad, leaning forward as usual, asked Derek how he was enjoying his new job at the bank. "Very well, sir," he replied with a polite smile, then suddenly squeezed Chloe's hand and, a little sheepishly, said, "Actually, we wanted to tell you something. Last weekend I proposed, and we're engaged." A moment of silence gave way to a veritable explosion of joy. Mom burst into tears right at the table. Dad stood up to shake Derek's hand. Marcus slapped him on the back approvingly. Jenny immediately demanded to see the ring. The kids screamed with delight, as if they'd just received a puppy. I watched as Mom, trembling with joy, hugged them both and asked about the wedding. And Chloe, beaming, replied that they were thinking about next fall. Nothing too grand, but just to be right, and added that Derek's parents would like to meet our family for dinner next month. I sat nearby, cutting my meat into ever smaller pieces and trying to smile, even though I felt like I was drowning inside. Everything was going as usual. First Marcus and his successes, then Chloe and her new frontiers, and I remained somewhere in the shadows, and no one even bothered to ask how I was doing, even though I'd just recently landed a major catering contract that would have made everyone in the restaurant proud. If only anyone had cared. No one asked if I was dating. No one even cared if I was happy. "Roxy, pass the salt," Marcus said, not even looking at me, and I silently handed over the salt shaker, returning to my fries. "Oh, that reminds me." Mom suddenly perked up, turning to me. "Roxy, I need to talk to you about Christmas." My heart leaped because finally at least some attention was directed at me, and I braced myself for what she wanted. "We're celebrating here," she said, "but this year it's going to be much bigger than usual. Marcus is coming, Jenny's parents, her sister's family, Derek's parents, his brother and his wife, and of course, our whole regular family. Aunt Marie, Uncle Bob, Linda, and the kids. I figured about 20 people. Isn't that wonderful? 20 people at one table." "Mom, that's a lot of food to cook," I said cautiously. "Are you sure you can handle it?" She smiled in that tone that I immediately recognized as a request, couched in solicitous words. That's what I wanted to talk about. I can't cook for 20 people on my own. So I thought, since you work at this expensive restaurant, maybe you could order all the food from Cervantes, delivered right on Christmas Eve. Professional food, no hassle for me, and you'll probably get a discount. Everyone turned to me, and I felt their gazes literally burning into the air. I sat with a fork in my hand, thinking about how a full Christmas dinner for 20 at Cervantes would cost a fortune. This wasn't just any place, it was a luxury restaurant, and with Christmas premium prices, which would be a huge burden to bear. "Mom, that would be really expensive," I said, feeling a knot in my stomach because I knew this conversation wouldn't go the way I wanted. "How expensive?" Dad raised his head, his voice stern and direct, as always when it came to money. I took a deep breath and said almost automatically, "A full Christmas dinner, all sides, appetizers, dessert, for 20 people, plus holiday prices, about $3,200. A silence fell over the table, as if everyone was trying to digest what they'd just heard. I added hastily, "Look, I could contribute, well, maybe 1,000, but everyone else would have to pay the rest." "What?" Mom said sharply, her eyes flashing. "Roxy, you make a good living, you run a restaurant, can't you get a discount?" I sighed heavily and shook my head. "That won't work, Mom. I'm the manager, not the owner. Even if I could negotiate, that's still a huge order for Christmas Eve itself. But you could probably figure something out," Jenny interjected, smiling sweetly, as if her words were nothing more than good advice. "A family discount." Everyone's eyes turned to me again, and there was something almost reproachful in them, as if I were a little girl who refused to share a toy. "I could ask, but I doubt it would work," I finally said. $1,000 is about what I can realistically afford. Everyone else will have to chip in." My mother's gaze was so cold that I found it hard to breathe. "Roxy Marie Madison," she said, each word a death sentence. "I can't believe you just said that. You should be ashamed. You make more money than anyone at this table. You work in a restaurant, and now you're haggling with your family over Christmas dinner." "I'm not haggling with you, Mom," I said almost pleadingly, feeling my cheeks heat up. "I'm just telling you how much it costs and offering to pay a third." "A third?" Chloe whispered, leaning toward Derek as if I'd insulted her personally. "God, she's so greedy." Derek chuckled softly, and I felt my chest tighten with resentment. "Sorry," I managed to choke out, but Chloe snapped back. "Nothing." "What did you say?" I asked, barely keeping my voice from shaking. She looked straight at me and shrugged. "I just think you have it easier than anyone. You don't have to support a family like Marcus. You don't have wedding expenses like we do. You live alone in your little apartment. What do you even spend money on?" "Are you serious?" I felt my voice breaking, but I continued because I couldn't keep silent any longer. "Roxy," my father interjected, his voice so stern that I instantly fell silent. "Your mom is trying to give everyone a good Christmas. The least you could do is help her." "I offered to help," I replied, and at that moment I felt like I was standing alone against everyone. I offered $1,000. "That's not help," Mom said, her voice tinged with steel. "It's making your family nervous while you sit on your pile of money." I turned to Marcus as if seeking support. "What do you think?" But he only shifted in his chair and quietly said, "It's awkward. I mean, it'll be a bit crowded, but if everyone stays silent again." "You know what?" Mom's voice suddenly became quiet and deathly calm, which made me feel even worse. "Forget it. Roxy, you'll pay for everything yourself. This discussion is over. You earn a ton of money, you'll eat this food too, and this is your part of the family Christmas. I looked at her, not believing what I was hearing. Dad nodded in agreement. Marcus and Chloe looked away as if embarrassed, but no one took my side. "Okay," I whispered, feeling my voice tremble. "I'll order takeout." "Okay," Mom said briefly, her eyes no longer searching mine. "Delivery at 5 o'clock on Christmas Eve." I nodded, but the piece of meat on the plate felt like a stone, and I couldn't swallow it. My appetite vanished. The conversation drifted to Emma's school play, Luke's toys, Chloe's wedding planning, and everyone around me laughed, discussing details, while I silently ate the leftovers, feeling like a stranger at this table where I once belonged at home. Later, while helping Mom clear the dishes, I carefully hid my eyes so no one would see my tears, then got into the car and drove home, gripping the steering wheel tightly, as if it could hold back the storm inside me. $3,200, I thought, counting in my head, as if that would make it any easier. But it was Christmas, and this was my family, and it seemed no one but me could pay for it. The next morning, I placed an order at Cervanto's: beef tenderloin, honey-glazed ham, all the possible sides, appetizers, 3 desserts, everything to set the perfect holiday table that Mom would be proud of. I put down a deposit of $1,500 and scheduled delivery for December 24th at 5 p.m. My boss, Tony, looked at the order and, whistling, said, "A big family Christmas." "Something like that," I replied, forcing a smile. "Your family will eat like kings," he added, and I nodded, feeling my heart grow heavier. There were 3.5 weeks left until Christmas, and during that time I had to not just live, but also manage the restaurant, where December always turned into a crazy whirlwind of company parties, family gatherings, and romantic dates that filled every table until late at night. I threw myself into my work, as if hoping the hum of the kitchen, the clinking of glasses, and the endless orders would drown out the heavy feeling inside. And I tried not to think about the $3,200 I'd promised to spend on Christmas dinner, even though the very thought of that amount weighed on me every morning and every evening. I was used to it, though. Every month for the past year, I'd been sending my mom $1,000 to help with the mortgage because my dad had taken early retirement due to health problems, and my mom's part-time job at the library only brought in a pittance, barely enough to cover everyday expenses, and of course no one, not Marcus, not Chloe, ever contributed anything, even though they always had money for new phones, trips, and fun things to do, and somehow I was the one who shouldered all the financial responsibilities. And now, between the mortgage payments and this Christmas dinner, I was counting in my head, over $4,000 spent on the family in just 2 months. And it was especially heartbreaking when I heard Marcus excitedly talking about how he and Jenny were planning a trip to Disneyland with the kids, and Chloe was busy preparing for the engagement party, and no one even thought to ask how I was coping. Christmas Eve finally arrived, and this time I took the day off, a rare occurrence for me, as the restaurant rarely offered a break. But Tony always had a heart and made sure all the employees had the opportunity to spend Christmas Eve and Christmas with their loved ones. I knew Cervanto's would be closed anyway, so I already felt an unusual sense of relief that morning. At noon, I called the restaurant to make sure everything was ready for delivery at 5 p.m. to my parents' house, and Maria, our chef, said warmly, "Everything is ready, Roxy. The ribs look perfect. The ham is glazed and cooked through. All the sides are prepped. The appetizers are packed, and 3 desserts are ready. Your family will have a fantastic dinner." "Thank you, Maria," I replied, grateful that she had taken on such a request on Christmas Eve. "No problem," she replied. "Family is important." These words struck a chord with me, and I quickly thanked him again, hanging up the call because a strange ache had settled in my chest. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was planning to head to my parents' house early to help with decorations and preparations for the party. I just pulled on the red sweater I'd bought, especially for the holiday, when my phone vibrated with a Facebook notification. I automatically opened the app and instantly felt sick. On the screen was a fresh family photo. Mom, Dad, Marcus and Jenny, Emma and Luke, Chloe and Derek, all beautifully dressed, beaming with smiles, posing in the living room I knew down to the last detail, and behind them towered the perfectly decorated Christmas tree we always placed in the same corner. But I wasn't in the photo, and underneath the picture, Mom had written a caption, "Only my most beloved and dearest people. Merry Christmas from our family to yours." I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over again, as if that would change them, but they remained the same. Only the most beloved and dearest. And then I scrolled down to the comments that had already begun to appear. Aunt Marie, kind and thoughtful, wrote, "Beautiful family, but where's Roxy?" And Mom's response left me speechless. "Oh, that's okay. No one will notice her absence anyway." I sank heavily onto the sofa, still wearing my coat, and the phone almost fell out of my hands. They'd taken a family Christmas photo without me, and that wasn't enough. Mom had deliberately written the caption as if I genuinely didn't exist, and when she was asked directly about my absence, she simply dismissed it as unimportant. And the worst part was, they could have waited. Just an hour, and I would have been there. They could have taken the photo together later, including me in the frame, like a real part of the family, but they decided not to. They decided to immortalize only those they considered beloved and dear, and that wasn't me. This wasn't new. As a child, I already knew that Marcus and Chloe were the favorites. When Marcus made the school football team, my dad took him out to a celebratory dinner, as proud as if his son had won the World Cup. When I received honors for 4 semesters in a row, no one even said a word. When Chloe got her first job at 16, my mother threw her a small party with cake and gifts, while my achievements always remained somewhere in the background. And now history was repeating itself. Only this time it wasn't a childish insult, but a cold knife piercing my heart. When I was promoted to assistant manager at 25, I remember the joy swelled in my chest, but I celebrated alone, without congratulations from my parents, without a celebratory dinner, without the words of pride I so desperately wanted to hear. So I simply ordered a pizza, poured a glass of cheap wine, and sat by the window, imagining that someone would finally say, "We're proud of you, Roxy." And then I remembered the celebration they threw when Marcus graduated from high school, a huge backyard party, music, balloons, neighbors, relatives, his friends, all gathered to congratulate him. And I watched, as if silently learning to accept my place on the bench. When my friends and I, just 5 of us, went to Applebee's for dinner because that's how many of us were there, and I wanted to somehow celebrate my promotion, my dad kept complaining about the prices, loud enough for us all to hear, and I tried to laugh, even though I felt my joy dwindle with every word he said. When Chloe graduated from college, her parents rented out an entire hall, invited the whole family, booked live music, and the entire evening was a sea of smiles, flowers, and toasts. When I got my business degree, there was a card in my mailbox with a dry congratulations note, and that was it. Even holidays were always built around Marcus and Chloe. I remember Christmas mornings when we were kids, and the pile of presents under the tree would always sit at their feet, while my little pile would look like someone's forgotten corner. "Roxy doesn't need so much," Mom would say, adjusting the tinsel on the tree branch. "Roxy is more practical. She appreciates useful gifts." And useful gifts came in the form of socks, notebooks, and school supplies, while my siblings opened boxes of games, toys, and new gadgets. I was used to being in the shadows, helping in the kitchen, clearing away wrappers, refilling drinks, but not truly being part of the fun. But when I saw that photo on Facebook with that caption, when I read Mom's dismissive comment about my absence, it all sounded different today. Not like the old, familiar resentment I'd learned to swallow, but like a resounding blow to my heart. Maybe because I was planning to spend $3,200 on their Christmas dinner. Maybe because I'd been dragging them down financially for a whole year, while Marcus and Chloe hadn't contributed a cent, and now, on Christmas Eve, I found myself the odd one out again. I took off my coat, sat down on the couch in my red Christmas sweater, and looked at my phone again. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to see any of them. I read the caption under the photo over and over again. Only the most beloved and dearest people. And it seemed like every word pushed me further away. I dialed Cervantos. Cervantos, this is Maria. Maria, it's Roxy, I breathed out, feeling my voice shake. I need to cancel the order for today. What, Roxy? Maria sounded genuinely confused. Everything's almost ready. The spare ribs are perfect, the glazed ham, all the sides are ready. We were just about to pack everything for delivery. I know. I closed my eyes, pressing the phone to my ear. And I'm sorry. I'm willing to pay for everything. But please don't take the food to my parents' place. But Roxy, please, Maria, just don't take it there, I interrupted, hanging up before she could ask any more questions. 15 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was Tony. Roxy, what the hell happened? He asked sharply, but his voice was more concerned than angry. Maria said you canceled the order. Everything's ready. And suddenly I found myself telling him everything, about the family dinner, about how they always expected me to pay, about that photo, about Mom's words. I talked, and he remained silent. Didn't interrupt, just listened. Then he said quietly, "Oh God, Roxy, I'm so sorry." He paused for a moment, and I could hear his breathing. "Listen, you don't have to pay anything. I'm refunding your entire deposit." "Tony, you don't have to do this," I whispered, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. "Actually," he said, "everything worked out perfectly." Half an hour ago, one of our regulars called in a panic. They had a family emergency and needed a full Christmas dinner today. I didn't know what to say because we were completely booked, but now I can give them your order, and they'll pay for it themselves. When I hung up the phone, I felt an unexpected lightness, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I knew for sure I wouldn't go to my parents' house. I wouldn't smile and pretend everything was fine while they enjoyed a dinner I'd paid for but hadn't been invited to. I opened my phone and sent Christmas messages to friends and colleagues, everyone except my family. Then I turned it off, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe freely. I was planning to spend Christmas Eve alone, and unexpectedly, that suited me just fine. There were frozen dinners in the freezer that could be quickly heated up, and a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. It would be quiet and peaceful here in my apartment, and for the first time, I felt like that was exactly what I needed. Around 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang, and I reluctantly rose from the couch, sensing that I wasn't expecting anyone, and that any unexpected arrival that evening could upset the fragile balance I'd just achieved. I looked through the peephole and saw a man with a red jacket and large paper bags, and my heart began to beat faster, because I already knew it wasn't a mistake. "It's from your boss, Tony," the delivery driver said, handing me the bags, which smelled of warmth and spice. He asked me to say, "Merry Christmas." I carried the bags into the kitchen, opened them, and nearly burst into tears, because inside was a real Christmas dinner, just for me. Sliced beef sirloin glistening with juices, golden brown roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes so fluffy you wanted to spoon them straight from the container, and even a neat slice of chocolate cake generously covered in frosting. Tony had sent me Christmas dinner. My boss had shown me more thought and attention than my own family had in years. I heated up the food, set the table, put out a glass of wine, and turned on the old Christmas movies I'd always known by heart. And sitting alone, I suddenly felt like this was the best holiday I'd had in a long time. I ate, savoring every bite, and for the first time all month, I didn't have to worry about money, bills, what Mom would say, or paying for everyone again. And yet, somewhere inside me, a curious thought awoke. What was going on at my parents' house? By now, guests would surely have begun arriving. Cars were pulling into their yard, children were running around the Christmas tree, and adults were waiting for dinner. They'd probably already called the restaurant and been told the order had been canceled. I imagined their faces when they realized there was no food. On the one hand, I felt a little ashamed, but on the other, I felt satisfied, because they themselves had made it clear that I wasn't really part of the family to them, just a source of money. Now they could manage without their ATM. I went to bed earlier than usual, and sleep came easily, because for the first time in months, I felt calm and free. On Christmas morning, I turned on my phone, and the screen was flooded with notifications. 53 missed calls, dozens of messages, all from family. I opened them one by one and watched the panic rise. 5:47 p.m. Mom. Where's the catering? They should be here by now. 6:15 p.m. Marcus. Roxy, where's the food? The guests are arriving and there's nothing to eat. 6:32 p.m. Chloe. Roxy, answer your phone. What about dinner? 6:45 p.m. Dad. Roxy, we need to know what happened with the restaurant. Call us back immediately. 7:23 p.m. Mom. I called Cervantos and they said you canceled. What the hell is wrong with you? 7:41 p.m. Marcus. Roxy, you've completely ruined Christmas. Jenny's parents are horrified. The kids are asking why there's no dinner. 8:15 p.m. Chloe. You're crazy. Totally crazy. Do you know what you've done? Derek's parents think we're poor white trash who can't afford Christmas dinner. 8:52 p.m. Mom, we had to send everyone to McDonald's. On Christmas Eve, Derek's parents left early. Sister Jenny asked what kind of family we were. You humiliated us. 9:34 p.m. Dad, Roxy, I don't know what's come over you, but this is unacceptable. You've ruined everyone's Christmas. The messages grew angrier, more desperate as the night wore on, and I suddenly found myself smiling as I read some of them. McDonald's on Christmas Eve. I could clearly picture Mom's face as she had to explain to 20 dressed-up guests that there would be a Big Mac for dinner. At 10 a.m., the phone rang. It said, Mom. This time, I answered. Roxy! Mom's voice was so loud and angry that I pulled the phone away from my ear. What the hell have you done? You completely ruined Christmas. 20 people came expecting a wonderful dinner, and instead we had to send them to McDonald's. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I remained silent while she screamed, and I could hear her voice breaking with anger. Derek's parents left an hour later. They think we're crazy. Jenny's family looked at us like we were laughing stock. The kids cried because they didn't understand why Christmas dinner meant hamburgers. You ruined everything, Roxy. You destroyed everything. I held the phone closer and after a pause, said evenly and calmly, Are you finished? And for the first time in my life, I felt like my voice was louder than her screaming. No, I'm not finished, I answered firmly, my voice shaking not from fear, but from the fact that everything I'd been holding inside for so long had finally burst forth. I want to know why you did it. Why did you deliberately ruin our Christmas? Mom was almost sobbing and suddenly added, breaking down, I saw your Facebook post. There was a pause in the room, and I pressed the phone to my ear and frowned. What Facebook post? I asked, genuinely confused. A family photo. Her voice broke into a whisper. The one where you wrote, Only for my dearest and most beloved people. The one where Aunt Marie asked where I was, and you said no one would even notice I was gone. The silence thickened between us, and I hesitated to answer, even though my heart was pounding faster and faster. Roxy, Mom tried to soften her voice. What are you doing? I interrupted, a fury I'd never known welling up in my chest. You forgot I'm supposed to be there. You forgot I'm paying for the whole dinner. You forgot I exist unless you need the money. You've got it all wrong, she said quickly, her voice desperate. I haven't got it all wrong. My voice was low and hollow like a bell. You've made it clear how you feel about me. So I decided that if I'm not loved and valued enough to be in a family photo, then I'm not loved and valued enough to pay for your dinner. That's not what I meant, she sobbed, but I didn't let her finish. Yes, that's exactly it, I said harshly, and my chest suddenly felt lighter. And you know what else? I've had enough. I'm done being your ATM. I'm done paying for everything while you ignore me. I'm done pretending we're a real family when you, Mom, clearly don't see me as part of it. Roxy, you're talking nonsense, she growled, trying to regain control of the conversation. Nonsense? I laughed bitterly. I've been sending you $1,000 every month for a year to help with the mortgage. Marcus doesn't pay. Chloe doesn't pay. Just me. Well, that's over with. You won't see a penny from me starting in January." "You can't be serious," her voice wavered. "Absolutely serious," I said coldly. "You have 2 beloved children who can now help you with the mortgage." "Roxy, wait!" Mom spoke quickly, but I'd already hit the end button and without a second thought, blocked all their numbers. For the next 2 hours, I rushed around the apartment, washing laundry, putting things away, wiping shelves, as if every rag and every movement helped me cleanse myself of decades of resentment and expectations. When the doorbell rang around noon, I froze and went to the peephole. Everyone was standing on the landing. Mom, Dad, Marcus and Jenny, Chloe and Derek. Their faces were tired, flushed, some angry, some depressed, but all of them were determined. I opened the door. "We need to talk," Mom said, pushing past me first, as if it were her apartment and not mine. The others followed, and soon my entire living room was filled with people who felt out of place in my own home. Mom stood across from me, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Roxy, I don't understand why you did this. Why did you ruin Christmas, and now you're threatening to stop supporting us financially?" "I wasn't threatening you," I replied quietly, but with such steel in my voice that silence fell over the room. "I was just telling the truth." "But why?" Chloe interjected, her voice shaking, and she looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. "What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me?" I laughed, but my laugh was bitter and harsh. "You're calling me greedy just because I didn't want to pay $3,200 by myself. You're excluding me from the family photo, and Mom openly says no one will notice if I'm not in it. And now you're asking what's wrong with me." Everyone looked at each other, confused and at a loss. "Roxy," Dad said carefully, stepping forward, "if it's about that photo, your mom already deleted it." I looked at him for a long moment. "You think we're talking about just one photo?" "What else could we be talking about?" Marcus asked, surprised. "What else?" I almost screamed. "When was the last time any of you did anything for me? When was the last time you showed any interest in my life? When did you treat me like a family member, not just a bank account?" They froze, some turning away, some nervously twitching a shoulder. "We always include you," Jenny began quietly. "No, you don't," I interrupted sharply. "You only include my money." "It's not the same thing." Mom burst into tears again, covering her face with her hands. "I don't understand why you're doing this to us. Without your help, we'll lose our house. You have 2 other kids." I looked at Marcus and Chloe. "Why should I be the one paying?" "Roxy, be reasonable," Marcus said, his voice patronizing. "You earn more than us, and that makes you responsible for our parents' mortgage." I walked to the door and opened it. My heart was pounding, but my voice was firm. "I want you all to leave immediately." "Roxy," Mom tried to speak again, her voice shaking, but I interrupted her. "Everyone get out," I said sharply. "I'm done with this conversation, and I'm done with all of you." They hesitated, as if hoping I'd change my mind, but finally reluctantly walked out into the hallway. Mom was still crying, looking over her shoulder at me, but I stood my ground. I slammed the door and locked it with a turn of the key, feeling a strange mixture of relief and heaviness rise within me. Then I immediately went to the computer, opened my online banking, and with one click canceled the automatic monthly transfer to Mom's account. And when the system confirmed, I suddenly felt as if an invisible chain had been lifted from me. For the first time in years, I felt free. But freedom isn't always easy. For the next 2 weeks, my phone never stopped ringing. It rang day, night, early in the morning, and the names of people who had rarely bothered to call me before appeared on the screen. Aunt Marie, Uncle Bob, Cousin Linda. They took turns, as if they had a schedule. Every conversation boiled down to the same thing. "Roxy, your mom is so upset. It's destroying the family. Roxy, no matter what happens, you have to forgive them. They're your family. Roxy, your parents raised you better." I listened to these words, and with each passing moment, I felt more and more like no one wanted to hear me. No one asked what my parents had done, why I had decided to take this step. No one tried to understand my side of the story. They just wanted me to give in again, to fix everything again, to repeat the familiar cycle. I sacrifice, they accept. I hung up, not wanting to continue this farce. Time passed. 2 months after Christmas, I was sitting in my office at Cervantos, reviewing inventory reports, when the door cautiously opened. Maria walked in, and I immediately saw from her face that something was wrong. "Roxy," she said quietly, "some people have come to see you. They say they're your parents." I froze, not immediately believing what I was hearing. I went to the window that looked out onto the reception waiting room and saw them. Mom and Dad. They were sitting next to each other, their shoulders slumped, as if an invisible weight were weighing them down. They looked terrible, tired, tense, as if they'd aged 10 years in just a couple of months. When they entered my office, the atmosphere was like we were attending a funeral. Mom sank into a chair, uninvited, her eyes puffy from crying. Dad looked like he hadn't slept for several nights. "Roxy," Mom said quietly, "we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied coldly. "Yes, I do," Dad interjected, his voice tense but firm. "We came to apologize." I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and waited. "The photo was a mistake," Mom began, her lip trembling. "My comment was a mistake. We should have included you. We should have waited for you. I deleted it as soon as I realized what I'd done. You showed me how you truly felt," I said slowly, each word like a knife. "Isn't that true? You wrote, 'Only for the dearest and most beloved.' And I wasn't in that photo. And when someone asked where I was, you said no one would notice my absence. It wasn't an accident." There was another pause. Dad cleared his throat as if preparing for a difficult confession. "We talked to a therapist," he said. "She helped us understand some things." I raised my eyebrows, not hiding my sarcasm. "Like what?" "Like how we really did treat you differently than we treated Marcus and Chloe," Mom said, her voice wavering. "We took you for granted. We expected you to solve all our problems, and we didn't give you the same attention we did to your siblings." It was almost surreal to hear that confession, the words I'd been waiting for my whole life, but couldn't believe when they finally came. "The therapist made us write down everything we've asked of you over the past year," Dad continued. "The monthly mortgage payments, Christmas dinner, all those times we turned to you for help, but never even thought to call Marcus or Chloe. When we saw it all on paper, we realized we'd been using you." Mom nodded, tears welling up in her eyes again. "And we're sorry." "Dad had to go back to work," she added, "and I got a part-time job at the grocery store. We don't need your money anymore. We just want our daughter back. We know we screwed up," Dad said. His voice broke, but he didn't lower his eyes. "We know apologizing won't fix everything, but we want to try to change the way we treat you. We want to earn your forgiveness." I looked at them sitting there, their eyes filled with a genuine remorse I'd never seen before, and only one question swirled through my head. What about Marcus and Chloe? Do they still think all this is just my moodiness, my penchant for drama? Mom looked down and, almost in a whisper, admitted that at first, that's exactly how it had been. They were angry, thinking I was exaggerating, that I was making a scene out of nothing. But then, when my parents explained everything to them, told them about the counseling and how, for the first time in their lives, they admitted their mistakes, something changed. Chloe, Mom said, was crying, and it was one of those rare tears that breaks through a wall because Dad added, "She said she never realized how differently we treated you and Marcus. They both want to apologize." I sat listening and digesting every word, feeling like I was being offered more responsibility and respect than ever before, and it was so unfamiliar that I almost didn't know how to react. "I'm not ready to forgive you yet," I finally said, and for the first time in my life, this no sounded louder than all my previous yes. Mom's face fell, her eyes filled with silent despair, but Dad only nodded slowly, and there was no anger or pressure in that nod. Only quiet agreement. "We understand," he said. "We just wanted you to know. We realize our mistake. We're working on changing, and if one day, when you're ready, if ever, we'd like to try again. Can we ask you one thing?" Mom spoke carefully, as if every word could destroy the delicate balance. "Could we at least call you sometimes? Not for money, not for favors, just to see how you're doing." I took a deep breath, letting the request sink in. "Maybe," I replied. "I've thought about it, but I need time." They didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't try to win me back with the usual persuasion. They quietly left, closing the door behind them, and I remained sitting in my office, staring into the void, feeling two feelings warring inside me: long-standing pain and timid hope. For the first time, they acknowledged their behavior. For the first time, they apologized without excuses or conditions. 3 months passed. I didn't call my family, and they didn't press me either. Occasionally, a short message from my mother would flash on my phone: "Hope you have a good day," or "Thinking of you." The messages didn't require a response, and it was a new, almost unfamiliar sign of respect for my space. My bank account, meanwhile, looked better than it had in years. Without the $1,000 monthly payments, I suddenly saw the money starting to add up, the numbers growing, and instead of a tired sigh when I opened my online bank account, I caught myself smiling. I started looking at travel packages, allowing myself for the first time to consider a real trip, not for someone else's sake, but just for myself. Work was going well, too. Tony, my boss, gave me a raise after the Christmas incident and said he'd never seen a manager handle a difficult and awkward situation with such grace. His words confirmed to me that I truly had value not only as a source of income for my family, but also as a professional, as a woman who could take a beating. And, as if to prove that life can surprise, I began dating Tom from the liquor store seriously. He turned out to be a gentle, attentive person, a good listener, and when I introduced him to friends and colleagues, everyone liked him without exception. We spent evenings over a glass of red wine, talking about books, about movies, about how for so many years we'd both lived for others, and how suddenly it was time to live for ourselves. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was living for myself, that I no longer had to manage other people's problems, to carry them on my shoulders as if I didn't have my own. I wasn't sure when or if I'd ever make peace with my family. The pain still lingered within me, old and familiar, but no longer all-consuming. And yet I couldn't help but notice their confessions, their visits to therapy, their unconditional apologies, all of it meant something. Maybe someday we'd have a real relationship where I'd be valued more than my bank account. Maybe one day I'd be able to trust them enough to believe they truly treated me like a daughter, not just a resource. But for now, I was content with what I had. I was content with myself, my freedom, my new life. I realized that being alone is better than being used. I realized I deserved more than being a secondary figure in my own family. And most importantly, I realized I could stand up for myself, even if it meant being alone. For the first time in 30 years, I felt like I knew my worth, and that worth would never again be measured in dollars.